Welcome, dear listener, to Legendary Shleep. Tonight, we enter the sands of time, into a myth born beneath the golden sky of ancient Egypt, where the sun was once thought to die each night, only to be reborn at dawn. This is a tale not of battles or thrones, but of stillness, of endings, and what may come after. You may have heard the name Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead. But not all who walk the lands beyond life are cold or cruel. Anubis, guardian of tombs and guide of souls. The silence before twilight. The journey began with stillness, not darkness, not fear, just quiet. A kind of emptiness that wasn't cold, only complete. The soul stepped into it, not knowing exactly where she was or how she had arrived. Before her stood a narrow stretch of stone, like a path laid out across water that didn't ripple or move. She was alone, until she wasn't. He appeared just ahead, waiting, as if he had always been there. Anubis. His presence was unmistakable. Tall, composed, wearing a black jackal's head with a gaze that met hers directly. No words, no need for them. He was not there to frighten her or guide her with commands. He simply waited, calm and expectant, as if he knew she would come. She took one cautious step, then another. Her footsteps made no sound. The path held her. The silence did not feel like punishment. It felt like it was watching, listening, letting her begin. Anubis turned and began to walk. Slowly, she followed. The landscape didn't shift the way places in life did. There were no trees or winds or scents. But there was presence, a sense that something larger was in motion, and she was now part of it. She walked beside Anubis, not behind him, not beneath him. He didn't lead like a ruler. He walked like someone who had done this 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. This was the beginning of her passage through the afterlife, and he was the one appointed to see her through it, not to test her, not to judge, but to make sure she didn't walk alone. The Weight of the Hearth. The next place they arrived was open and wide, though it had no walls or roof. It didn't need them. It was the place where souls were weighed, where the truth of a life came forward. At the center stood the scale. One side held the feather of Ma'at, a symbol of truth and balance. The other side remained empty. She knew what would be placed there. It was time. Without a word from Anubis, her heart appeared. It did not beat. It simply hovered, steady and waiting. She looked to Anubis, unsure. He gave no instructions, only watched, making it clear that what happened here had to come from her, no one else. Her heart lowered onto the scale. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scale shifted, just slightly. That's when the memories came. Not all of them, just a few. She saw herself as a child, angry at her brother. She remembered stealing once, then giving twice as much later when no one asked her to. A lie she told, a kindness she forgot, a kindness she remembered. Anubis remained beside her, not reacting, not judging, just present. She realized this wasn't about guilt or pride. It was about facing what was there. When the memories faded, the scale balanced. Not because she was perfect, but because she was honest. Anubis gave a single nod. That was all. She didn't know what came next. but she knew she could walk toward it, with him still at her side. The Boat of Twilight. The path beyond the scale led to water. This time, not the still, dark river they had crossed before, but something broader. A lake, perhaps, or a sea. The horizon was dim, but not empty. There was a faint light, like the last of the sun resting just beneath the edge of the sky. At the shore, a boat waited. It was long and narrow, built of wood darker than any she had seen in life, yet without a single flaw or knot. Its shape reminded her of the funerary boats carved into the tomb walls. Boats meant to carry the soul across the underworld, toward whatever lay on the other side. Anubis stepped onto the boat first. She hesitated, then followed. There was no ferryman, no oars. The boat began to move on its own, slow and smooth. It didn't cut through the water. It glided, like something carried by memory more than current. For a while, there was nothing to say. The soul sat near the front, Anubis standing behind her, tall and silent, watching the horizon. She looked back at him. "Do you ever speak?" He didn't answer right away. Then softly, not in words but in thought, she felt the reply. "I speak when there's need. Most are comforted more by quiet." It made sense. She looked out across the water. "Where are we going?" "Where you are meant to arrive," came the answer. Still calm, still without force. The water began to shift. Not the boat, not the surface, but the color. Flecks of silver drifted just beneath, like dust caught in lamplight. She leaned over slightly and saw images. Her father's face, a market square, a basket of figs, her own hands lighting a small oil lamp. "Memories," Anubis said. "Mine?" He nodded once. "They travel with you. You do not carry them as weight. You pass through them. The important ones stay." She watched a few more, small, ordinary moments. Not triumphs or tragedies, just pieces of life. It was strange. The things she remembered here weren't the things she had thought she'd carry. Not the large, dramatic choices, but a time she shared bread with a stranger. A song hummed in secret. The feel of the sun on her shoulders during one quiet morning walk. She spoke again. "Do you ever get tired of this?" "I do not tire," Anubis replied, "but I do remember." "Remember what?" "The ones who walked before you." The boat drifted on. There was no sound but the gentle motion of water, and occasionally the flicker of a memory breaking the surface like a ripple. The soul thought about the scale and how her heart had trembled when it was weighed. "I wasn't sure what it would show," she admitted. "None ever are. Some must fail." Anubis looked down at her, not harsh, not distant. "They fail only when they cannot face what they were. The truth is not what you did, it's what you're willing to see." The boat began to slow. Ahead was land again, pale shore, quiet and still. It curved like a crescent beneath the twilight sky. She stood. Anubis stepped off first and held out a hand, not to lead, but to steady. She took it, and once again they walked forward, together. Whispers beneath the sand. The shore was firm beneath her feet, dry and pale, but not lifeless. The ground gave slightly as she walked, like old cloth stretched over hidden shapes. The air carried a low hum, Not sound exactly, but something felt, like the pressure of a thought pressing just behind the ears. Anubis walked beside her, still wordless, still steady. But his presence had changed. Closer, perhaps, or maybe more familiar. Ahead stretched a desert. Not the desert of the living with heat and wind and the cries of distant birds. This place was quieter. The sand here seemed to remember things. And as she walked, the whispers began. Faint at first, gentle, no more than a breeze. But as she listened, she began to recognize words, phrases, her name spoken in a tone she hadn't heard since childhood, a question her mother used to ask, a phrase her sister had said once, in passing, that no one else would remember. She paused. Are those mine? Anubis gave a slow nod. Memories others held of you. She frowned. But I thought only my memories followed me. They do, but sometimes the echoes of others come too, especially when they were never spoken. She turned her head. The voices weren't mournful. They weren't praise or regret. They were simply there, leftover pieces of life, like footprints in soft dust. She heard a boy's voice say her name, shy, unsure. She remembered him now, a friend from her youth, long faded from thought. She had once laughed at him for crying when his dog died. At the time, it seemed small. Now, she wished she had done it differently. The sand beneath her shifted. Small ridges formed, shapes rising gently, like broken statues buried beneath the surface. She knelt and brushed one with her hand. It felt like stone at first, but softened into something else. A face. Familiar, but not recent. An old woman she had once helped in the market long ago. She had never thought of it again until now. She remembered you, Anubis said, even after you forgot. It made her chest feel tight, not in pain, but in something else, some strange kind of gratitude, that even the smallest kindness might live longer than the one who gave it. They continued walking. The desert was wide, but not endless. There were no dangers here, only remnants. What had been said, what had been left unsaid, moments that had passed without notice, still echoing faintly through the silence. How long do souls stay here? She asked. As long as they need. She thought about that. Did I do enough? Her voice was soft. Anubis didn't answer with certainty or false comfort. You did what you could, and you are still walking. That is enough for now. The whispers began to fade. The sand quieted again. The wind moved gently, as if exhaling. Ahead, the path became clearer. A narrow gate of dark stone marked the next passage. She looked toward Anubis. He gave no command, only walked forward, and she followed. The Gate of the West. The gate rose from the ground without sound or force. It wasn't built of bricks or carved from pillars, but formed from dark stone that shimmered faintly, as if light had touched it long ago and never left. It stood alone in the desert, no wall around it, no structure to hold it. Just two tall slabs standing side by side, with the space between them as still as breath before a word is spoken. Anubis slowed. The soul stepped closer, unsure of what lay beyond. The sand around the gate had changed, finer, cooler, marked with symbols. They looked familiar, but she couldn't read them. Not letters, not pictures. Something older. Something that felt like memory etched into stone. She looked to Anubis. Is this the end? No, came the quiet answer. Only the passage. She waited, but he didn't move. This gate is yours, he added. It opens when you are ready to pass through it. She stared at the space between the stones. It looked harmless. It didn't glow or threaten or hum. But something about it made her chest feel heavy. What's on the other side? Anubis did not offer promises. Whatever is true. She considered that. It wasn't fear she felt. It was the weight of decision. Once she stepped through, she couldn't return. Not to the memories, the echoes, the comfort of walking beside him. What if I'm not ready? Anubis looked at her, his jackal eyes steady and silent. Then you may wait. The soul sat down in the sand. It surprised her, how natural it felt to rest here. The world didn't rush her. The gate didn't pressure. Even Anubis simply stood, his tall form casting a long shadow behind her. She thought of the life she'd led, the people she'd touched, the moments that passed without knowing they mattered. She wondered what others might carry of her, and what she had left behind that was never spoken. Then she asked, "Why are you the one who walks with us?" Anubis was still for a while, as though the answer was not rehearsed, but remembered. Because I do not look away. When the body breaks, when the voice fades, I remain. I hold what is left. I protect the passage. And who walks with you? No one. The answer was simple, without sadness, without pride. I walk alone so no one else must. The soul looked at him and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Not cruelty, not coldness, but weariness. A quiet kind, born from centuries of watching and remembering. She stood again. The gate waited. With one last glance at the place she had come from, she stepped forward, and the gate opened, not with sound or movement, but by simply no longer being in the way. She passed through, and Anubis followed. Not because she needed guidance now, but because no soul ever crossed alone. The names we leave behind. Beyond the gate, the landscape changed again. The sand was gone. In its place stood a flat, quiet plain covered in soft, ash-colored grass. Each blade shimmered faintly, as though dusted with starlight. The wind stirred here, not sharply, but gently, like a sigh. She felt lighter, not physically, but as though some invisible burden had been set down behind her. Without her noticing, it had been carried. Anubis walked beside her, the same as before, present, unshaken. Yet something in him felt quieter too, not less watchful, just more still. Far ahead, she saw a series of shapes, rows of tall, slender stones standing upright, each spaced evenly apart. As she drew closer, she realized they were names. Not names she could read, not letters, but impressions, feelings, memories held in a single form. Each stone represented a soul, and what they left behind, not just in words, but in meaning. Anubis paused beside one. She approached it. As she looked closer, she didn't see a name written on the surface. She saw moments, brief flashes of a life. The way someone laughed, a hand placed gently on another's shoulder, a prayer whispered in private, a face smiling in forgiveness. This one, Anubis said, was remembered not for what they built, but for how they listened. She touched the stone lightly. It felt warm. "Is there one for me?" she asked. "There will be." She walked slowly among the markers, passing by lives captured not in monuments, but in emotion. One stone glowed gently, full of music. Another carried the deep stillness of someone who had held space for others. Another was cool to the touch, but clear and simple, like truth left behind without decoration. What decides what is remembered? Anubis's voice was quiet. Memory chooses, not the memory of the gods, the memory of those who knew you. She thought of her child's laugh, the face of a friend, a stranger she had once helped without thinking, and she began to wonder, not whether she would be remembered, but how. Does everyone leave something behind? No, Anubis replied. Some leave nothing. Others leave too much. She stopped walking. What happens to the ones forgotten? They sleep, Anubis said, until someone remembers them again. The soul took that in. She had feared being judged. Now she feared being erased. And yet, the field did not feel lonely. It felt peaceful, quiet, like a place where meaning didn't have to be shouted, where kindness didn't have to be large, where a name could linger softly, even after the voice that spoke it had long gone silent. Anubis gestured ahead. There is one more place, he said, and then you'll know what you've left behind. She followed him. The path was shorter now, but her steps were slower. She wanted to see it all, every name, every story, every soul, because now she understood that to remember others was also to remain. The feather and the flame. The sky above began to shift, turning from deep twilight to a dusky, flame-colored hue, soft oranges and dim golds brushing across the plain. The light did not burn, and yet it carried warmth. Not heat of the body, but warmth of the soul. The kind that reminds you you've come far, and that there's just a little further left to go. Anubis led her toward a raised circle of stone, low to the ground and ringed with simple symbols. At its center was a single flame, no larger than a lantern's flicker, floating above a perfectly balanced feather, the feather of Ma'at. But this was not the same one she had seen in the weighing. This was not a test. It was something else. She approached slowly. The flame did not move in the wind. It was steady, suspended in stillness. Anubis watched her, silent and calm. "What is this?" she asked. "The part of you that is ready to stay," he answered. She didn't fully understand, but she felt something inside her stir. Memories that weren't tied to regret or pride, just truth, the essence of who she was. The flame flickered softly. She thought about the people she loved, those she had hurt, the choices she had made without knowing their weight. She thought of the journey here, of her steps beside Anubis, of the silence, the names, the gate. The flame pulsed gently, not brighter, not larger, just sure. And then the feather lowered itself slowly into the flame. There was no smoke, no burn, only a brief shimmer of gold that expanded and then vanished, leaving behind stillness. She looked to Anubis. He gave the faintest nod. "It is done," he said. And somehow, she understood. She had given all she could. What remained was not for her to carry any more. The weight was gone. What was left was peace. Stillness and the Stars. They stood for a time, saying nothing. The plains stretched quiet around them, stars beginning to pierce the sky, not as tiny lights, but as watchful eyes, steady and soft. She did not feel tired, but she no longer needed to walk. "Will you stay here?" she asked him. "I will walk with the next," he said. She knew it was true. He would return to the beginning, to the shore, to wait again in silence. "You don't rest." "I am rest for others." That stayed with her. She looked around the plain one last time. The field of names, the paths of memory, the place where hearts were weighed and whispered. "Where do I go now?" "That is not mine to tell," Anubis said, "but you are ready." She looked at him one last time. This being who had never judged, never hurried her, never turned away. "Thank you," she said softly. His answer was simple. "You do not owe thanks, only peace." She turned, and where the flame had been, now there was only an opening, one not seen with the eyes, but felt with the heart. She stepped forward, and behind her, Anubis watched, still and solemn, before turning slowly back to the dark horizon, where another soul would one day arrive. Thank you for joining us tonight, dear listener, for the story of Anubis and the dead, a tale of endings, memory, and the quiet guidance that comes when all else fades. In Egyptian myth, Anubis was never the god of punishment or fear. He was a guardian, a companion, a presence in the dark, reminding us that when we pass into silence, we do not pass alone. Perhaps the lesson of this tale is not about what we leave behind in gold or name, but in the way we walk, the truths we hold, and the stillness we offer others along the way. If this story brought you calm, or gave your mind something gentle to hold as you drift towards sleep, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to LegendaryShleep. I share bedtime myths and soft legends from around the world, stories to settle your thoughts and carry you quietly into rest. Until the next Legendary Sleep, may your dreams be light, your heart be steady, and your journey be watched over. Sleep well.